welcome everybody to our cmBuilder workshop, right? So as you can see, our theme for today is the Odyssey, right? So my little question to start over here, probably I should have asked like, what is your favorite Christopher Nolan movie? Just like Nikon put it over there. But I'm asking like, what is the latest great book that you read, right? So if there are people that not know this, the Odyssey is based on a book. So like I decided to go a little bit backward and ask you guys, what is the greatest latest book that you've read? And this is an image of the book that I'm reading right now. I will answer questions about this image later. And yeah, so let's check our workshop agenda over here today. Let's talk about, we're going to talk about initial topography, how this new tool that has been fixing several things related to site conditions is a very important tool for people that have been experiencing distortions with the site condition. I'm going to do a drone import review of the workflow, bringing in a drone into cmBuilder now that we have the Google Maps model in there. So like, how do you interact with these two references at the same time? That might be conflicting references and so on. Some highlights of new stuff that we're doing over here. So new date units, earthwork operations on the tree, new animation mannequins, and some tips and tricks related to site condition locking and zones to highlight the site. Okay, so as usual, our recording will be available in 24 hours, probably sooner than that. You should always check our workshops on YouTube. We have like a lot of good material over there. To the thing that I like to describe about the workshops is that one is for you to keep updated with everything that is new in cmBuilder with instructions in real time, and two, for you to become a power user of the platform, right? So how do you go from like a beginner, intermediate to becoming a power user, right? So please use the QA in the chat for questions and for comments, and talk about everything that you want. It's over there. It's free for everyone. And participate, because we really like when you do that. It's good to see the community interacting and sharing like good practices and experiences that you're having. There you go. Awesome, Eric. There you go, bro. Book 4. That's what I'm audio reading right now for the third time. Okay, cool. So let's jump ahead over here in our main topics, right? So initial topography. This is a new tool that we have released probably like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. All right, and the ability here is to give you some way for you to create an accurate shape of your terrain topography, and you can use that to fix the distorted site conditions as well. Not just that, but this is one of the main reasons of this tool. So basically, the problem that we have today is that whenever you create a site conditions in cmBuilder, and for new users, I'm gonna show like quickly what that means. Basically, that area in which you create the site condition gets replaced by another topography from Google. So these are two databases that we don't have control of, right? So as you can see over here in this location, when I created my Google Maps initial topography, this is where the topography is. But when I created a site conditions in this area, the whole topography got distorted on that location, right? So this is something that we don't have control, but now we have a very, very easy way for you to fix that. And one of the things that are coming next is that we have in our work in progress right now, we are working on an automatic way for you to capture the terrain shape. I'm going to mention a little bit more about this later. Okay. So I am going to go through these instructions now, like how to do that, right? So let's take a look at the problem here first. So this is a scenario where let's say that I'm gonna have some work done around this area over here. So I'm gonna kind of like demolish all of these buildings and then do something in their location, right? So just to start, I really like doing this, starting with a 3D line that will give you like an idea of a template of the area that you're gonna replace, because this 3D line, you can reuse that for several other reasons, right? So I'm gonna create a 3D line over here of the area that I'm gonna work with. Let's call this our bounding, our perimeter line of the project. Okay, so this is just a reference. So I have my 3D line over there, and so okay. So if I were to create a site condition right away to replace this model, these building models over here with to clean up this area, I will create now a set condition and I will project the 3D line. So if I were to do this like very quickly, you will notice that the distortion that I've mentioned before, like so the whole area has been pushed up. It has been cleared of the buildings, but the whole area has been pushed up. And this is happening because Google is replacing this topography, this area of the topography that doesn't match with the previous one. So this is not ideal, right? Of course. So what we're going to do right now is that we're going to create our initial topography. So to do that, the first thing that I will do is to create a reference surface. So I mentioned how to do this in the last workshop, so I'm going to do it again today. So basically, I'm going to create a new reference surface from points, and I'm going to be placing points on locations that I know that are referring to the terrain, and also locations that I can understand. I see if that there is like changes on slopes. Basically, I'm trying to create points over here, control points, where cmBuilder will create a surface from those points, and this is what cmBuilder will consider the initial topography. So I'm gonna go around this site over here, and I'm gonna be placing some points that just to represent like the shape of topography. I like to create, like whenever I'm creating roads, I like to create points on both sides of the roads just to get like an extra definition of that topography. We never know what might be the slopes on both sides and so on and so forth. And I will also add points around this area over here. So very important that we make sure that we are not placing points on top of trees or anything like that. That we are placing points that on the actual topography of the site. Okay. So because otherwise, cmBuilder is going to consider that as the initial topography of your terrain. And I'm going to add some other points over here on just on other control areas over here in between that whole area, because otherwise cmBuilder will just extrapolate. Like whenever there are areas without points, cmBuilder will try to extrapolate the shape of that location from the points that are closer to it. Okay, so you want to add points as many as you can, just to give like some context, but you don't need to add like a bazillion points as well. Like the spacing that I'm doing over here for there, just like this one that is roughly flat, that's totally okay. So when I hit confirm, like cmBuilder will create that topography over there, right? So if I hide everything, we will see that there is a shape now that represents the shape of my topography. Okay, so from this point onwards, what we're going to do, like after we create the existing topography, we want to create this topography before we do the site condition. And the reason why is because I want to capture the unaltered topography. If I create these points after I create a site condition, that whole area that is my area of interest has been adjusted or like modified already. Okay, so we want to create these points before, so we capture the existing conditions over there. You can also bring in drawings with contour lines, point tables from a survey, takeoff, or civil 3D points into the platform to create the shape whenever you have this information available. But in this case, I'm just going with the shape that the Google Maps already generated over there. Okay. After that, I'm going to assign the initial topography. So the initial topography is a function of the Earthwork timeline. We might review this flow later, but for now, we need to use 3 different tools in cmBuilder to create this kind of like process. So the first one is using the reference surface. Second tool that we're going to use is the Earthwork timeline. So when I go here in my Earthwork and I click on the timeline, on the top, there is this new thing over here. This is the new part of this process. The initial topography kind of like item on your timeline. And what we're going to do from here is that we're going to select which surface cmBuilder should consider as the initial topography. So I'm going to change the initial terrain over here to reference surface. And for now, I cannot select any of these two items, and I'll explain in a minute what they mean. And I need to select the smoothing distance. The smoothing distance is how much, what is the propagation that this kind of like this whole process would have like away from the areas that you don't have points for. Okay, so you can like increase the remove smoothing distance over there. And for now, what cmBuilder did was to replace the whole shape of this reference surface with the initial topography. So as you can see, it created a site condition automatically for me. And from this site condition that it created automatically, it took it all and put the shape of the surface instead. So right away, you can see the difference between like that distorted site condition topography that we had before to this topography now that is supposed to be the actual topography of my site. Okay, so once we done this, like we can now create our own site condition shapes. So I will create it created one by default over here for me, but I don't want that to be my site condition. I want to control exactly what is the areas that I want to replace. You can have a surface that is larger than your site conditions, that's totally fine. But if we create one site condition over here, for example, for this church, I believe this is a church, I can hit confirm, and it will take this area and bring in from the auto-generated area, and it's going to add this as a separated site condition. So now that I have a site condition created over here that I controlled myself, I can go back into my my terrain timeline, my initial topography here, and I'll have these two options. So these two options will tell me like what I want to do with my initial topography. Do I want to apply that to the whole area of the reference surface, or do I want to apply that just to the locations where I created a site condition? So when I do this, like, and I hit confirm, this will recalculate, and as you can see, that site condition that was automatically generated is no more, and the only thing that is left over here now is that the one that I created manually. So now when I remove this object from the view, that area over there is following the shape of the surface. So this kind of like selection here is for you to decide if you want to use the whole surface as a topography and we will create a site condition from it, or if you want to apply that topography only on areas that you created the site condition for. Okay, so in this case, like if I were to keep on going over here and let's say that I'm gonna demolish these buildings, but I'm gonna demolish them in stages, I can now create my site conditions, my other site conditions over here, and in the location of every one of these, instead of like pushing up the terrain upwards like it was before, we are gonna follow now that I created before. So I have like this and this over here. If I create a site condition outside of the area that I have an initial topography for, this will not have the topography in that location to represent the shape of the terrain. So this terrain over here is following that kind of like default terrain surface from Google. Okay, so there you go. So this process really helps like anyone that is working with site conditions and then gets a weird result from Google, right? So again, this is something that we can't control, but now you have a way to flush this out with a lot more detail and a lot more accuracy with your initial terrain. Okay, so it's a new tool. and we are kind of like revising right now, like what is the flow exactly that we want the customers to follow, the users to follow, like because not all locations will require this process of you creating your initial topography. Sometimes you create a site condition in the topography that is put into in that place is good enough, but a lot of times it's not. So this is how you fix that. Okay. And one last thing that I think that is important to mention is that every earthworks operation will require a site condition. If you create a cut on this area over here and there is no site condition created for that area, cmBuilder will create a site condition for you. And I mentioned this in the last workshop that we should always have a site condition encompassing all the excavation areas. Better if you do it beforehand, because then the software doesn't need to keep like processing every time that you create a new cut to create a new site condition automatically. And a pro tip is to use lines as templates, because I think like these lines that you create, especially to represent things like your site boundaries or the divisions that you're going to do in this, like site conditions, for example, you could have them all in this single line here, just like I have this example, where like I will keep reusing them whenever I need them. So like if I want to create a site condition following these shapes, I can. If I want to create zones following these shapes, I can, and so on and so forth, right? So this is one thing to keep in mind, that using lines is a great way for you to keep reusing that geometry, because now every time that I'm going to draw something, let's say that I'm going to place draw a zone over here, instead of drawing that zone from scratch, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna hit project on my sketching tool, and I can select a existing geometry like a line, and then that zone is created for me automatically. Okay, so keep that in mind. And the last thing, I know that this is like probably the third last thing that I'm talking about right now, is that you can further adjust your site conditions if you need, and creating them in the nesting order. What does this mean is that if I have created a site condition over here and another one over here, and then I try to create a new site condition inside of this guy here, let me confirm this. No, like this new site condition over here, it was going to be empty. There's nothing visible in this one, because that area has already been claimed by a site condition before. So I cannot like steal the areas from other site conditions and place on this one. And the same area cannot belong into site conditions at the same time. The only thing that works in this case is whenever there is an auto-generated site condition, and then you create one on top of that, and then that area is going to be claimed to the one that you created manually. Okay, I hope that this was clear, and if it wasn't, please send some questions on the chat over there. Is there anything that I need to answer, Nikan?
No, we're good. No questions at the moment.
Cool. Yes, please give it a try. Let us know of feedback or like different situations that you're encountering, because like we cannot test these tools in everywhere in the world. So like you guys are a good sample of like testing to let us know like if a location in the UK is working well, if a location in the US is working well, in Brazil, in Australia, whatever you guys working on this. If you cannot replicate the steps that I mentioned here today, let us know so we can get into it and invest. Okay. Coolio. And also, it would be great to have some feedback from you guys related to the flow itself. Like if the steps of like going into different tools to create this action, if this is confusing, if it's not, just let us know what you think. Okay. Cool. So next thing that we're going to talk about today is drone import review. So
Sorry, Pedro, before you go into that, we do have a question from Terrace. says, you currently
Mhm.
shuffle the order of excavation operations. Is there a chance we will be able to do this with site conditions in the future in case we don't want to foresee these nesting order, to force the nesting
Um,
order?
yeah, I think that this is not hasn't been a request by anyone so far, but it's a great request, a feature request for us to consider on the next steps. Cool. Okie dokie. So, next step is drone import review. We have had like a lot of people bringing in drone material into cmBuilder. Now with the Google Maps model that already has like a whole 3D shape over there of buildings, terrain, and vegetation, and so on, already inside, you're gonna notice that there is some conflict, and also we want to make sure that to give proper instructions for you to manage that with your site conditions and all of that. Cool. So basically, you're gonna import drones whenever you want to bring updated references to your site context, right? So you're working on an area and the data from Google Maps is outdated. Things have been demolished. The satellite picture that's showing over there is it's outdated. Whatever reason you want to bring your drone import over there to kind of like bring this to a more current state of work, right? So the three main things that we're gonna use the drone imports for is to adjust the topography of your site to according to a scan, right? Because the scan from Google Maps is coming from a satellite. Your scan coming from a drone is going to be more accurate, of course, and also more updated. The surrounding buildings. So if you want to kind of like have more control in how you're going to slice these buildings up, if you want to have like if you have a more updated reference of the surroundings with vegetation and buildings and so on, you can bring that as well. And the aerial image in Google, sometimes it's outdated, especially if you're working on like on greenfield, brownfields, where like you go there and you go to to the site that you created in cmBuilder and you notice that area image is outdated, you can bring an ortho mosaic picture from your drone to project that on the ground. Okay. So I want to give a big thanks to Ben Stocker. Ben Stocker has been like a really help for us over here, especially related to drone stuff. Like when I was preparing for this workshop, I noticed that I didn't have a good drone example, so I called him and I asked for like something that I could use today. And I would like to say that I've did this like a few days ago, but it was this morning. So thanks, Ben. You were here, bro. Can I make this face? There you go. Cool. So workflow review, right? So the workflow for you to bring in your drone in information into cmBuilder is very simple. I have like a workshop that is very dedicated to this, and today I'm going to talk about the updates related to the Google Maps stuff, right? So first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go into your drone service, like people use Drone Deploy, Propeller, Pix4D, and I started seeing some new names flying around over there. But the main thing that you're going to do is you bring in an ortho mosaic image, export an ortho mosaic image, which is a flat image from top down of your site. It's not like a single picture of your drone, because if you do that, your drone camera angle distorts everything that is around the point that exactly below it. So an ortho mosaic is a combination of several images that will be put together to create a flat reference of that view of the site, right? So this will work with orthomosaic images. And the 3D models that sometimes drone services will export these 3D models in OBJ format or FBX format, right? So OBJ, usually when you download this OBJ format from like Drone Deploy, from example, the file itself will contain a OBJ file, an MTL file, and a bunch of images. So this is what you're going to download, and then you're going to convert that into an FBX. To convert an FBX, we use Blender because it's a free software and it's easy for you to go through the steps. And in Blender, we're gonna merge the geometries that we're gonna see over here. We're gonna reduce the images sizes, and then we're gonna import that to cmBuilder. And in cmBuilder itself, I'm gonna use the split tool to divide the model. Okay, so I am gonna show like the step-by-step on the use cases over here in a minute, but I just want to review like quickly two things related to the conversion of the FBX model when you're working with Blender. So I'm here with Blender, one of our oldest friends, and I'm gonna bring in that OBJ file that I showed in the picture over there. And then this is the OBJ that's coming directly from the drone deploy. And I'm gonna just change this Z up axis to Z over here. Basically, I open this folder and I drag this file in here, okay? So when I import this, this is gonna take a few seconds over there, and then the image is gonna show the model of that area. It's gonna show up over here in my view, okay? So this like it's going to be the view that of your drone, and there are two things that I would suggest to do over here. If I export this directly in cmBuilder, it should work well, but the thing is, every one of these materials that you see over here will show up in cmBuilder as a separated mesh for you to select from. So like in this example over here, I did the proper kind of like workflow, but like in Blender itself does not combine this geometry by itself. Like when you, if I exported this FBX directly from Blender into here, like when I selected this model, I would select the piece of it, and then also it would also select a piece of it over here. It's going to be all scrambled. So inside of this tree structure, I would have all of these materials that you see over here will show up in my tree structure as different elements for me to select. So this is not a big problem until you have to split the model. So if I had to split the model, I would need to keep selecting all of those materials, and I wouldn't have like combined shapes for me to work with. Like if I were to select to split this building over here only, I would have like several parts that would compose this building. So how do we fix that? The main way to fix that is using material combiner. So material combiner will take all of these materials that you see over here, and it's going to create one single material from it. So this is something that again, we have instructions in our user guide on how to download material combiner and so on, but it's an add-on to Blender. And when I click on this material combiner and I click on update material list, it would take all of those materials that you see over here and put in this list. So the standard process to export this and like to combine these materials is that we're going to set this atlas size over here to strict custom, and I'm going to click on save atlas to, and I just need to define that this is like a folder to save this this new image, which is a one single image that combines all those images into one, and then Blender itself is going to map which part of the image is going to go into what face. So I'm going to click on create atlas over here, and I'm going to get an error. So you see, I have this error over here that tells me that output image is too large. This is very common for drone elements. Like I've had a lot of requests recently of people asking like, how can I reduce? I'm trying to bring in my drone model into cmBuilder, but the images are too large, or like how can I reduce that? So just recently a user told me about this specific thing that I didn't know before. We had like a Python script that you go through and it would reduce the images kind of like for you. But if you don't have like a huge list of materials, what you can do is you can go each one of these materials and you can set up a custom image size, and then you define like over here a max width and max height. I'm just putting 2048 for both, and bear with me here for a second because I'm gonna need to do that for all of these 15 items. Not always you're gonna have like a big list. Sometimes this list is way shorter than this. Sometimes it might be bigger, and for bigger lists, I would suggest that you guys use the Python script that we have instructions in our user guide on how to use that. And just bear with me here for a second. Nikan, do you have like a joke like already set up over there to entertain the team over here while I'm doing this very tedious step-by-step thing?
I don't have a joke prepared. I can sing for the audience, maybe.
No, no, no. I'm already.
That
I'm
would be a
already
joke.
done. I'm already done. I'm already done. Please don't sing. You know. There you go.
Yeah, we
We got
might
our
lose
joke.
about half the audience.
There you go. So now, like that, I set this up for everything. I want to see that answer from Mark over there. I set up this everything like we can save this atlas to and from the save atlas, I'm gonna choose a folder and I'll create the atlas. So this will combine all that material list now into one single item over here. And then when I export that to cmBuilder, I'm gonna get like a very clean and neat model to work with. Okay, so I already did this process before, so I'm gonna just skip this here, like the instructions on how to export like the material into cmBuilder. It's very it's in our user guide as well. So I'm gonna start with this clean location over here, right? So the drone scan that we have over there, it refers to this area of the job over here. And like I mentioned, we have three different things that I want to do with that drone scan. One is to adjust existing topography, update surrounding buildings, and update the aerial image. So let me import the drone scan first. So I'm gonna go over here and beam import surroundings. Actually, just to save some time, I'm gonna copy the one that I already positioned properly over here, and I'm gonna paste it in this scenario. So I don't need to position it again. There you go. So imported the drone scan into my view. Whenever you're done with this process over here, basically you're gonna export an FBX file, and the configuration to export. The only thing they need to do is to change the path mode to copy. Click on this little button over here, and then define that your up is Z. If you have other elements in your screen and you want to just export the visible ones, you can also click over here and export visible elements, right? So once you import this into the view, you're going to position the model just like you position any model in the view, right? So that's what we have over here. Okay, so I have my drone scan in there. So what will be the process now for me to fix my topography? Same idea that I did before, but instead of tracing the Google Maps model that I have over here, I'm gonna trace my drone scan. So I'm gonna, just to define that I'm selected correct points, I'm gonna hide my map tile, and then I'm gonna look at this view here and say, okay, what is the topography that I wanna create? So it's very important that we take a look at the topography. If you probably know your project better than anyone, so you know what are like the differences in contours and things like that. So, but if you want assess this properly, just take a look to see where are the difference on slopes that might be important for you to represent and so on. And then you're going to go into terrain reference surfaces and then select the points, right? So instead of doing like just a 2D view over here where I'm going to place points, oh, I know that these are topography elements and whatnot, I'm actually going to look on 3D and I will see, okay, there is a slope over here. So I'm going to put a point on the top and the bottom of the slope. So I'm going to trace that slope as best as I can. If you want to place more points over here, you can. So it's up to you, right? So to create that. And again, we're working on better ways to do this process. For now, you have to manually place your points, but the idea is that very soon we will be able to do two things. One is to create a grid of points automatically. So you just select an area and say, add a grid of points over here that will be following the shape of the terrain. And two is to create like, if for the OGs of cmBuilder over there, like remember that there was a process of using cloud compare that used to extract the points that refer to just a terrain, and we would import that to cmBuilder. But the plan is to have this done inside cmBuilder. It's called like the cloth algorithm, and basically I will explain in a minute what it does. But once I hit confirm over here, it will create my shape. as you guys can see, a shape that is kind of like flushing with the terrain in most of the way over there. But the upcoming kind of like update of cmBuilder is that we're gonna create an algorithm that will just trace like from the bottom up of the model what are the points that refers to of the topography. I won't bother you guys with the details. Cool. So we got our terrain shape done over there. So now, like if I hide this drone scan, I have a shape of my terrain over here that was created following the drone scan, right? So I will now go ahead and create my initial topography over here with that reference surface, hit confirm, and then that whole area was created following the shape of my terrain. But of course, as you can see, because it created the whole area, it kind of like deformed the model, the surrounding buildings on that location and so on and so forth. So this is something that you can manage by creating like further site conditions. You know, you can just go over here and say, I want this to be an element of my site condition. So I can keep that object visible at all times, or you can say, I want to remove that object because I have my drone scan on that location. So like if this is the area of my drone scan. So if I create a site condition over there, I can now keep this area hidden at all times, and then I'll have my drone scan in the location instead of the buildings over there. And there are further distortions happening over here because of the site conditions. So this is something that I explained before. We can always create another site condition around my project area to make sure that I keep the geometry on that location kind of like not distorted. Okay, but I'll keep this unhidden. And then if I show my model, my drone model, I got now a combination of site condition elements and my drone scan. Cool. So this already kind of like covers both the just topography and updating the surrounding buildings on that location. And for the buildings, because now you're going to be working with an imported geometry, if you want to do more with it, you can use the split geometry tool, right? So which is something that you cannot use with Google Maps model. You can go over here and you can split the geometry of that building, and I'm doing this quickly because I've already explained that in other workshops, and say, okay, I want to take this area here and separate it from the rest. So now when I use that split geometry tool, this part of the building is separated from the rest. If I hadn't done the material combiner, this will be a way more painful process because I wouldn't be able to select just one object to split. I would need to select several, right? So don't worry about this. This is just the browser processing. And once it's done, now you have that geometry over there separated from the rest. So you can connect this to your timeline and create demolishing stages and so on and so forth, right? So now I have like this stage with it, this stage without it. Okay. And the last thing about the drone scans is that I want to have the ability of updating the image, the aerial image that I see over here. So I do have a drone ortho mosaic picture of that area over there. And this is also something that confuses a lot of people because like they bring in the drone scan and they start using the drone scan as their background. But because of the excavation tool, if I create a cut over here, let me go into the excavation tool and I create a cut over here. This cut will not affect the drone. It will only affect the terrain cmBuilder. So as you can see, I created a cut, but there's also already a shape over there. So like I just need to go ahead and hide these elements over here. So like I cannot use the excavation tool to go through this. So like the excavation tool will only affect the terrain. So to keep that reference of like what is visible, what is in that site, we're gonna bring in the orthomosaic picture. So to do that, we're gonna bring in like a drawing overlay, and I will drop this orthomosaic picture over here. And then from this point onwards, it's just a matter of like aligning this ortho tool and then projecting that on the ground. Okay, so I'm gonna use quick points over here. Not this one, Pedro, come on. This one here. And I believe that's this one here. And then something all the way out to the other end. There you go. So that image is still floating, but since I want to use that as a background, I'm going to put the opacity all the way to 100% and then project that on the terrain. So as you can see, I have like now a new image projected over there that when I create my cut, it goes through that image, you know, and not like through the drone shapes. So if you want, you can create cuts on the drone shapes splits as well, but I prefer to have the area where you're going to be doing the work without any drone shape, so you can like manage properly what you want from that. And also, let me just show this again. One thing about the drone, whenever you project this image on whenever you project this image on the shapes over there, like you will on the Google Maps model, you'll be projecting like something like a new image from above. The software doesn't know what to do with the vertical faces, with the facades. So like it's just creating this melting kind of like thing going on over here. But when I hide this, that shows the proper image from the background, like from the site conditions over there. So one thing that you can do to avoid having this melting kind of like visuals is to create to separate this shape in a site condition, and then you can say you can define like that you want this to be visible in all milestones and not allow projections on this surface. So if you keep this turned off, like whatever is projected on the ground over here is not going to affect that site condition element. Which brings me to my kind of like tips and tricks over here that when you create these site. Yeah.
Let's pause for questions if you don't mind for a
Go ahead.
second. We have a few questions. So one is, what is the best way to reduce drone scan sizes so cmBuilder doesn't bog down and take longer time to cut up the scan?
So I would say that this process that I did over here with the material atlas, like for you to reduce the images, that's the one of the ways. And the other way is for you to use our Python script that we have on our user guide that does this for all the images as one action,
Okay. And then has the same workflow been tested with .rcp? So recap, I believe files using a 3D Faro laser scanner.
So RCP files are point cloud files. We are not compatible with point cloud files. So if you get like a RCP, E57, LAZ file, LAS files, like XYZ files, these are all point clouds files. So you need to convert that into a mesh. So convert that into a proper geometry, a closed geometry, not points in space, right? So once you do that and you convert that to an FBX file, you can bring it over to cmBuilder.
And then finally, what's the max file size of image files, basically? I believe that's in reference to drone orthomosaic.
Like when we are importing drone photos, I don't know exactly what is the file cap to import, but like once you import it, we will cap that, we'll convert it to keep it as like a 50 meg file size. So if I'm not mistaken, you can bring in larger files than that, but cmBuilder will reduce it to like a 50 something megs as a file for size.
Okay, perfect.
Cool. Okay. So this is a little bit of a review of like what you can do with a drone, right? And just to finalize over here, like this part of like, okay, I want to keep my site condition over there. I want to keep my projection over there on the ground. I don't want that to be kind of like, I'm creating this site condition over here just to guarantee that the model is not going to be projected all around my site. Oh, sorry, on the vertical faces of the buildings. But I don't want to keep selecting these site conditions every time that I click on them, you know. So one way to do that is now that we have, you can create the site condition to keep that, to maintain the geometry that you want, deactivate the allow surface, and you can right click and lock all site conditions now. So this is a new tool as well that basically makes sure that when you click on the site conditions, like I'm clicking right now, you're not selecting them by mistake. If you double click on them, you'll be able to select it. And if you right click on them, you'll be able to select. So locked elements, what you cannot edit them, but you can temporarily hide and show them, and temporarily hide everything else with them, basically. Okay, so this is a way for you to manage all the context of your surroundings with your drone scans, without the drone scans if you don't have them, and so on and so forth. Cool. I hope this was clear as mud. Okay, so we went through the initial topography, the drone import. So now let's go and take a look at the new date units. So this is a new tool that we have released, I believe, like last week, and it's very easy one to understand. Oh, we got another question from Street over there. What's going on?
Can we lock the site conditions so that they don't change if Google gets updated?
I don't think so. So the information in cmBuilder is coming from Google, and it's live. It's updated whenever they send new stuff in. But the locking thing will basically just lock the interactions that you do in cmBuilder, not what Google is sending over to the site. Okay. So unfortunately, that's something that we can't control. Cool. So new tool related to time new date units, right? So the idea here is that we want to define the time units in which you're working on, and also which ones are you're presenting and how you're sharing your links, because you might not be in a stage where you want to commit with your schedule, or like you would define this based on the material of your schedule, right? So the way to adjust this now is to go over here on the settings, and then there's this new field over here for milestone and timeline display, where you can choose to show your dates as index only. So as you can see over here, showing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the count of the milestones. So as you can see, and even when I open my project schedule, I do not see the calendar dates in which they are assigned to, neither here. Even though these elements can be, these are milestones that were brought in from a schedule, I can decide not to show that scheduled date and the calendar date and so on. Okay. So the other way to do this is to show relative dates. So relative dates also will not show the calendar dates, but will show like in which month or weeks these milestones will fall in, considering that the first date is your start date, right? So you have almost kind of like a sense of duration, like duration of the whole timeline. So like this whole project took 22 months to complete basically. And I can see that in weeks as well, 96 weeks, right? But basically this is not giving you like a commitment with a specific date, whereas calendar date is where you're gonna see what you guys already see in cmBuilder as of today, the calendar dates over here from your schedule, and the kind of like index here can be either by months or weeks. So it's very similar to the relative date in terms of like this index, but the difference is that we're going to be showing the calendar dates. So you basically committing with these dates, depending on what you're using the simulation for, if you're showing this to a customer or so on and so forth, right? And I'm just explaining over here what is the difference between either these three options, and you can also define that this definition can also, also applies to, hey, what's going on over here? My export is not working. Let me refresh. That's a good thing about cmBuilder. If anything it's blocked at that moment, you just refresh your view and then you will be able to see those actions again. So this also affects the share live links. So in the live link, when you create a live link to a presentation or simulation, you'll be able to edit this over here where you can define like how you want to show those dates whenever someone opens that link. And if I create this link here, that can be like on my dashboard, I can go and see this is the link that I just created. So I can edit this link and I can go back and say, okay, I don't want I now want to show this as a relative date or as a calendar date. So it would change how the date units are applied to that shared link. Okay. Okay, so I saw a question for there from Jacob. Related to the previous topic, is the custom terrain model function still not using Google Maps map tile? No, so like these custom terrain model endpoints, as you can see, like in Google Maps model, we don't even have them available anymore, right? So this has been replaced by the terrain reference surfaces in the initial topography tool, because now you have more control in you on how to use those references. Okay. Another update, and this is an update that is in experimental feature stage, is that the ability for you to visualize the earthworks operations in your tree structure. So by default, everyone that works with excavation will work with this timeline over here. But we now have in our user settings over here, in experimental features, you can turn on the show earthwork operations in the tree. And basically this will give you the ability for you to visualize your excavation operations over here too. So like this will, it might not like make a huge difference on your workflow, but is a way for you to visualize where these operations are happening, to keep consistency with the other tools. But also it helps you debug excavation operations a lot. Like I just yesterday, I had a session with a customer and he was having some trouble with his excavation. And when I opened his scenario, I noticed that there was this auto-generated site condition that was the same shape as the whole site. And I was like, what is causing this auto-generated site condition? And I couldn't find it on the tree, on the excavation timeline. If I were, I would need to select each one of them to figure out like what was generating that. But from this drop down over here, I could select and highlight where these elements were. And then I noticed that there was one of the operations was not showing any kind of like highlights over here. So that was the operation that was causing a problem. So this is a good way for you to visualize where your excavation operations are, and you can click on them to see like what is the footprint and where they're located, and therefore debug and find like problems and so on. Okay. And the last thing about this is that this is a step that is required for us to add earthworks into other to give more actions for it. Like for example, a duplicate ability to copy paste operations, between scenarios and move the excavations that you created on scenario number 1 to scenario number 2, right? The ability to multi-edit, you have like multiple people working on excavation tools. So we need to have those on the tree structure to have that consistency going on. Okay. So, we only have like 5 minutes left. Okay, cool. So Manikin updates, this is a little bit of the a step forward from what I showed a few workshops ago, that like our mannequins now have better animations applied to them and better quality for the mannequins as well. So you're gonna notice that we're upgrading like the the shapes of all of these mannequins so they are more realistic and less kind of like polygonal and so on. And you can create more kind of like better animations for them. So like if I apply this to this guy here, for example, to the way to find them in our library, you just need to let you search for worker animated, and then you're gonna go over here in visual programming, and you're gonna see the options of creating the presentation, like an animation following the site plan or the presentation mode. I already explained this before, and as you can see, I will assign like the controls to manage these animations are getting better in the way that you having more things showing up on this site on this site sheet instead of you going into the edit function here and so on. You can see them in the site sheet, and you can select even the curve in which this guy is supposed to walk in here by setting this up, starting offset, the speed, and so on and so forth. Like these controls will all be here. Okay. So give it a try. The way to find them is worker animated on our, if you go over here in the resource library and you search for animated, you're going to find like a bunch of one of these animated workers. Okay. So this is one thing. I already talked about set condition lock, and this is a very small thing. So like just like a quick thing that I saw a customer doing. Basically, whenever you want to highlight an area of work, one way to do it, like before I mentioned like the ability for you to create zones inside of the work area, so you could highlight where the work was done. But what if you want to fade the background and just keep the work area as with live colors and things like that? You can create a zone that basically encompasses the whole map, but create another polyline inside of that zone to create a remove area for that zone. And basically you're just creating like an exclusion area here for the impact of the zone. And then you can define like a different color for the background over here. I'm using white, but you can like put in like a faded thing like this, where it will be very clear to know where the construction is. And again, it's a great way for you to use the templates of your zones, like of your lines. So if you create everything using the same shape from a projected line, you have like better consistency between the geometry of your elements. Okay. So I think that's it for today. Okay, so we talked about initial topography, we talked about drone imports, new dates, earthwork of the tree, animation mannequins, site condition lock, and zones to highlight the site. So yeah, the main part of our session today is concluded, and we're gonna stay for a few minutes more over here to answer questions.
Quick question from Carlos, or maybe this is more feedback, but just to verify that this is the case, it's can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be great to keep the option we previously had to display the milestone number together with its corresponding date. Made it easier to identify and track milestones.
Like a combination of the index plus dates. So maybe we can, like on the calendar dates over here, we can have like another toggle to show the count as index or not.
Yeah, we can log that as feedback on the new design on your behalf, Carlos, and share with the team.
Cool. I think that's it. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye then.